The Devil's Witness Pluggo. My world has always been composed of 88 keys. My name is Serafina Ricci, and my life happens on the 10 feet of polished stage between my piano and the silent. Watching dark, music is my sanctuary, my only truth. Tonight, that truth was shattered by the sound of a lie. I was walking home through a rain-slicked alley when I heard the voices. Then I saw them, a pleading, older man and a younger man holding a gun. Don Falcone sends his regards. The shooter said. The sound that followed was not a bang, but a soft, choked cough from a silencer. The older man crumpled. The shooter, Leo Falcone, turned and his eyes met mine. Panic seized me. I ran. His footsteps were heavy, relentless. Behind me, I burst onto the street and a long, black car screeched to a halt in my path. The back door flew open. "Get in," a voice commanded, low and Russian. I chose the unknown devil over the one I knew. I scrambled inside, landing on a plush leather floor. The man sitting opposite me was not the shooter. He was something else entirely, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit. He exuded an aura of absolute, chilling stillness. His face was carved from ice, his eyes the color of a winter storm. "You are Serafina Ricci," he said. It was not a question. "My name is Nikolai Volkov." The name hit me, the Pakhan of the Volkov Bratva, the Falcone's greatest rival, and you have just become the most valuable person in this city. Vengeance is a symphony that takes years to compose. I'm Nikolai Volkov, and for 10 years, I have been its patient conductor. The Falcone family took everything from me, my father, my mother, my sister, in a car bomb. I have spent a decade rebuilding my family's power for one purpose, to see their entire empire burn. Tonight, the final, crucial instrument fell into my lap. I had been watching, waiting for Leo Falcone to make a mistake, and he did. He left a witness, Serafina Ricci, the city's celebrated pianist. A perfect, unexpected note in my composition. I watched her run from the alley, a hunted animal. I waited, letting the fear build. Before my driver opened the door, I wanted her to see my car not as a choice, but as the only salvation. The police are irrelevant, I told her, my voice cold as I laid out her new reality in the back of my car. By the time they act, the Falcones will have silenced you permanently. Your life as you knew it is over. She stared at me, trapped, her beautiful face a mask of conflict. You have two choices, I continued, my voice a soft, silken trap. You can take your chances on the street against the Falcone hunters, or you can accept my protection. In exchange, you will be my witness. You will help me destroy the family that is hunting you. You are a monster, she whispered, her voice full of a sudden, quiet fire. A ghost of a smile touched my lips. Yes, I said. I am, but right now, I am the only monster on your side. I sat back, letting the silence stretch. I had laid the board. I had set the pieces. Now, it was her move, and we both knew there was only one move she could possibly make. The Devil's Witness, Part 1. The sound of a lie. My world has always been composed of 88 keys, 88 blocks of ivory and ebony that I can arrange into joy, sorrow, rage, or peace. My name is Serafina Ricci, and my life happens on the 10 feet of polished stage between my piano and the silent, watching dark. Music is my language, my sanctuary, my armor. It is the only truth I have ever known. Tonight, that truth was shattered by the sound of a lie. It was late. After a performance of Rachmaninoff that had left my soul raw and my body humming with adrenaline, I had eschewed the waiting car service, choosing instead to walk the few blocks back to my apartment through the rain-slicked, empty streets of the city's historic district. I needed the cold air, the quiet, the space to let the music settle. That was my first mistake. I was cutting through a narrow, cobblestoned alley, a shortcut I'd taken 100 times, when I heard the voices, low, angry, spoken in Italian. I pressed myself into the shadows of a recessed doorway, annoyed at the intrusion. There were 2 men. One was older, well-dressed, his face a mask of pleading terror in the faint glow of a street lamp. The other was younger, wearing a leather jacket, his movement coiled and dangerous. He was holding a gun. It's ugly. Black form a discordant note in the quiet symphony of the night. "Please, Leo," the older man begged. It was a mistake, a miscalculation. You asked, the Falcones do not tolerate miscalculations, Senator, the man named Leo said, his voice a cold, flat monotone. Don Falcone sends his regards. Then came the sound, not the loud, angry bang of a movie gunshot. It was a soft, choked cough, a lie of a sound, thanks to the silencer. The senator crumpled to the ground, a puppet with its strings cut. The shooter, Leo, didn't even glance at the body. He turned, his gaze sweeping the alley, and his eyes met mine for a heart-stopping second. We were frozen. He saw me. I saw him. I saw the mole just above his right eyebrow. I saw the glint of a silver ring on his pinky finger. I saw the cold, dawning realization in his eyes. A witness. My armor of music shattered. My sanctuary was violated. I was no longer Serafina Ricci, the concert pianist. I was a loose end. Panic, a raw, screaming thing I had never known, seized me. I turned and ran. I didn't scream. My voice was gone, stolen by the horror. I just ran, my heels slipping on the wet cobblestones. The sound of my own ragged breaths, a frantic, terrified rhythm in my ears. I could hear his footsteps behind me, heavy, relentless. I burst out of the alley and onto the main street, a blur of motion, a hunted animal, a long black car, sleek and predatory, screeched to a halt directly in my path. The back door flew open. "Get in," a voice commanded, low and urgent, laced with a Russian accent. I didn't think. The man behind me was death. This car was an unknown. I chose the unknown. I scrambled inside, landing in a heap on the plush leather floor. The door slammed shut behind me, and the car accelerated with a force that threw me against the seat. I looked up, my heart hammering against my ribs, into the coldest, calmest eyes I had ever seen. The man sitting opposite me was not the shooter. He was something else entirely, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit. He exuded an aura of absolute, chilling stillness. He was handsome in a severe, brutal way. His face carved from ice, his hair the color of a winter night. He looked at me not with concern, but with the cool, calculating assessment of a collector who had just acquired a rare and very fragile prize. "You are Serafina Ricci," he said. It was not a question. "You have just had a very bad night." He leaned forward slightly, and the faint, clean scent of expensive vodka and cold night air filled the car. "My name is Nikolai Volkov, and your night is about to get much, much worse." Part 2. The Vulture's Prize. Vengeance is a symphony that takes years to compose. Every note must be perfect, every movement calculated. For 10 years, I have been its patient, obsessive conductor, and tonight, the final, crucial instrument has just fallen into my lap. My name is Nikolai Volkov, and I am the Pakhan of the Volkov Bratva. I rule the city's shadows, a kingdom I inherited from the ashes of my family, the Falcone family. Under the old Don, planted a car bomb that took my father, my mother, and my younger sister from me. I was 18, and I was the sole survivor. I have spent the last decade rebuilding my family's power, piece by bloody piece, for one purpose: to see the entire Falcone empire burn to the ground. The current Don, Marco Falcone, is a snake, but his son, Leo Falcone, the one they call the Prince, is a rabid dog. He is arrogant, violent, and careless for weeks. My intelligence has told me he was going to silence a corrupt senator who was getting greedy. I have been waiting, watching for him to make a mistake. And tonight, he did. He left a witness. I watched it all from the tinted windows of my car, parked half a block away. I watched him kill the senator, and I watched as the girl, the city's celebrated pianist, Serafina Ricci, saw everything. She was an unexpected, perfect note in my composition. The Falcones would be hunting her. The police would be looking for her. She was the most valuable, and the most endangered person in the city. A tool waiting to be claimed. "Let them get closer, Dmitri," I said to my driver as Leo Falcone chased her from the alley. I wanted her to feel the fear. I wanted her to understand that the world she knew was gone, that there was no safe harbor for her. I wanted her to see my car not as a choice, but as the only salvation when she scrambled inside, a terrified, beautiful mess of rain-damp silk and wild, panicked eyes. I felt a cold, clean satisfaction. The vulture. They called me because I am patient. I circle, and I always claim what is mine. "My name is Nikolai Volkov," I told her, and watched the flicker of recognition, of dawning horror in her eyes. "And your night is about to get much, much worse." She stared at me, her chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saw the man who killed the senator," I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. "You saw his face. You would recognize him again." I didn't see anything," she lied, her eyes wide with a desperate, futile denial. "Do not lie to me, Miss Ricci," I said, my voice dropping, the coldness in it making her flinch. Lying is an insult to my intelligence, and I do not tolerate insults. I leaned forward again, my gaze pitting hers. Leo Falcone, the heir to the Falcone family, just murdered a United States senator in cold blood, and you are the only person on this earth who can put him at the scene. The police, she began. But I cut her off with a sharp, dismissive wave of my hand. The police are irrelevant, I said. By the time they pieced together what happened, the Falcones would have found you and silenced you permanently. You cannot go to them. You cannot go home. You cannot go to your friends. As of this moment, your life as you knew it is over. I let the words sink in, watching the hope drain from her face, replaced by a stark, terrifying understanding. You have two choices, I continued, my voice a soft, silken trap. You can take your chances on the street and see how long you last against the Falcone hunters. Or you can come with me. You can accept my protection, and in exchange, you will do one small thing for me. When the time is right, you will be my witness. You will tell the world what you saw, and you will help me destroy the family that is hunting you. She stared at me, trapped, her beautiful, intelligent face a mask of conflict. She was a pawn in a war she didn't even know existed. You are a monster, she whispered, her voice full of a sudden, quiet fire. A ghost of a smile touched my lips. Yes, I said, I am. But right now, I am the only monster on your side. I sat back, letting the silence stretch. I had laid the board. I had set the pieces. Now, it was her move, and we both knew. There was only one move she could possibly make. She was the vulture's prize, and she had nowhere else to fly. Part 3, the gilded cage. My new reality was a cage, a beautiful, breathtakingly luxurious cage, but a cage all the same. Nikolai Volkov's penthouse was a testament to wealth and power, a sterile, minimalist fortress of glass, steel, and black marble that occupied the top 2 floors of a skyscraper. It offered a god's eye view of the city, a glittering carpet of lights that seemed a world away. My world. I was a prisoner. I was given a suite of rooms that was larger than my entire apartment, with a grand piano in the corner that seemed to mock me with its silent, gleaming presence. I had a closet full of clothes from designers I'd only ever seen in magazines, food prepared by a private chef, anything I could possibly want, except for my freedom. My constant companion was a mountain of a man named Ivan, Nikolai's head of security. He was silent, watchful, and built like a brick wall. He was polite, but his eyes were as hard and empty as his boss's. Nikolai himself was a ghost. He would be gone for days, and then he would appear without warning, a dark, silent presence that filled the vast apartment with a new, thrumming tension. He would watch me, his cold, gray eyes assessing, probing. He rarely spoke to me about the murder. He seemed content to let me live in this limbo, this state of suspended terror. I did not touch the piano. My music, my sanctuary, was gone. The memory of the gunshot, the sight of the dying senator, had silenced the melodies in my soul. My hands, which could once dance over the keys with effortless grace, now trembled when I tried to play. All I could produce were ugly, dissonant chords that echoed the chaos in my mind. After a week of this silent, suffocating existence, I confronted him. He was in his study, a cavernous room lined with books, a single lamp casting his face in harsh shadows. He was nursing a glass of vodka, staring at a large, abstract painting on the wall. I can't do this, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. He turned slowly, his eyes unreadable. Do what, Ms. Ricci? Waiting, this silence, I said, my voice rising with a frustration that bordered on hysteria. You are keeping me here, a prisoner in your glass tower, and I don't even know what I am waiting for. When will this be over? When do I testify? He took a slow sip of his vodka. When I tell you to, he said calmly. Vengeance is not a sprint, Serafina. It is a marathon. It requires patience, a concept I thought a concert pianist would understand. This isn't a performance. I shot back. This is my life. Your life, he said, his voice dropping. The coldness in it making me shiver, is in my hands. A life I saved. Do not forget that. He put his glass down and walked toward me, circling me like a shark. The Falcones are tearing the city apart looking for you. They are getting desperate. They know a witness is a loose thread that can unravel their entire world. Right now, this penthouse is the only safe place on earth for you. Safe, I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. I am a prisoner of the Bratva. I am sharing a cage with a monster. Do not talk to me about safety. He stopped directly in front of me, his presence overwhelming. I am the monster who is keeping the other monsters at bay, he whispered, his voice a low, dangerous growl. You would do well to remember that. You are my weapon. Miss Ricci, a beautiful, high-strung instrument, and I will deploy you when you are most effective, not a moment sooner. He reached out, his finger tracing the line of my jaw, his touch as cold as ice. I flinched, but I held my ground. You are afraid, he murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips. Good. Fear will keep you alive. He leaned in closer, his lips hovering just inches from mine. But do not mistake my protection for kindness. You are useful to me. The moment you cease to be useful, I will have no more need for an instrument that will not play. The threat was clear, absolute. I was his possession, his tool, and I was utterly, completely at his mercy. He turned and walked away, leaving me trembling in the center of the room, the ghost of his cold touch on my skin, and the terrifying realization that my life was now worth only as much as the testimony I could provide. Part 4. Dissonant chords, the days bled into one another, a monotonous rhythm of luxurious confinement. I was a ghost in a glass tower, haunting rooms that were too big, too empty. The silence was the loudest thing in the penthouse. It was a screaming, oppressive void that I tried to fill with anything reading, pacing, staring out at the city that was no longer mine. But I would not touch the piano. It sat in the corner of my sitting room, a gleaming black sarcophagus containing the ghost of the woman I used to be. My hands, which had once been my gift, now felt alien, useless. The music was gone, replaced by the ugly, jarring memory of a body falling to the wet cobblestones. Nikolai continued his campaign of cold, calculated distance. He would come and go, a phantom in his own home, his presence a constant, low-grade hum of dread in the back of my mind. He provided for my every material need, but he starved me of the one thing I was desperate for: information, hope, an end. One evening, I found him not in his study, but in a room I had not seen before. It was a music room, but instead of a piano, it was dominated by a single, beautiful cello, resting on a stand in the center of the room. The walls were lined not with books, but with shelves of vinyl records, classical music, old jazz. He was standing by the window, a record spinning on a vintage turntable, a sad, haunting melody from a Russian composer I recognized. "My mother played," he said. Without turning around, he must have heard me enter. She was a cellist with the symphony before. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. He turned to look at me, and in the dim light of the room, his face was stripped of its usual harshness. The coldness in his eyes was replaced by a profound, ancient sadness. She said that music was the only language that could not lie. He looked at the silent piano in my suite, a silent accusation. "Why have you stopped speaking, Serafina?" "My language is broken," I whispered, my voice thick with a grief I hadn't allowed myself to feel. "The notes are gone. There's only noise now." "Because of what you saw?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. I nodded, the lump in my throat too big to speak past. "The world is full of noise," he said, his gaze distant, "of lies, of violence. If we let it silence the truth, the beauty, then the monsters have already won." He walked toward me, stopping a few feet away. "You are not just a witness to me, Serafina. Your music, I have listened to your recordings. It is a formidable thing. It is a light. I will not let the Falcones extinguish it." It was the first time he had spoken to me as a person, not a tool. The first time he had acknowledged the woman behind the witness. The unexpected kindness was a crack in my carefully constructed armor. "I can't," I choked out, a single, hot tear escaping and tracing a path down my cheek. "When I try, all I can hear is the sound." He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before his thumb came up to gently brush the tear from my cheek. His touch was not cold this time. It was warm, a spark of warmth in the desolate winter of my life. "Then play the noise," he murmured, his stormy gray eyes searching mine. "Play the chaos, play the fear, play the truth of what you saw. Give it a voice. And then, perhaps, you can find the music again." He dropped his hand and stepped back. The distance between us once more a chasm. "They will pay for what they did to you," he said, his voice once again the cold, flat tone of the Pakan. "For the music they have stolen. I promise you that." He turned and left the room, leaving me alone with the haunting melody of the cello and the ghost of his touch on my skin. He was a monster, a killer, a man who dealt in vengeance and death, but he had just given me a piece of his own broken soul. And in doing so, he had given me a strange, terrifying gift. He had given me a reason to play again, not for an audience, not for applause, but for myself, to play the ugly, dissonant chords of my new reality, in the desperate hope that I might one day find a beautiful melody again. Part 5. The first note of war. His words became a challenge, an obsession. Play the noise. For days, I circled the grand piano in my suite like a wary animal. It was a monster, a keeper of the music I had lost. Finally, one rainy afternoon, with the gray light of the city bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I sat down on the bench. My hands trembled as I lifted them to the keys. I closed my eyes, and the memory I had been suppressing came flooding back, vivid and horrifying. The dark alley, the pleading senator, the cold, indifferent face of Leo Falcone, the soft, obscene cough of the silenced pistol. My fingers crashed down on the keys. The sound that erupted was a monstrosity, a chaotic, jarring chord of pure rage and terror. It was ugly. It was violent. It was the sound of my soul breaking. I played, not with skill or technique, but with a raw, desperate fury. I hammered at the keys, creating a symphony of pain, a cacophony of fear. I played the gunshot. I played the man falling. I played my own silent scream. I played until my fingers ached, until sweat and tears streamed down my face. And then it was over. The final, crashing chord faded into a ringing silence. I sat there, my chest heaving, my body trembling with the aftermath of the storm. I was empty. The noise, the chaos. It was all gone. It was out of me, poured into the long-suffering strings of the piano, in the vast, echoing silence that remained. I felt a flicker, a tiny, fragile thing, a single, clear note of a melody. It was a start. From the doorway, I heard a single, slow clap. I looked up, startled. Nikolai was standing there, leaning against the doorframe, a glass of vodka in his hand. I hadn't even heard him enter. I had no idea how long he had been listening. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held a new, strange light, a mixture of respect and a deep, unsettling understanding. "Brava," he said softly. I flushed, a mixture of embarrassment and a strange, unwilling pride. It was hideous, I mumbled, wiping my face with the back of my hand. It was honest, he corrected me, walking into the room. And honesty is a rare and powerful thing. He stopped by the piano, his long, elegant fingers ghosting over the keys, not pressing them down. "You have found your voice again, Serafina. Now, it is time to use it." A cold dread replaced the emotional catharsis of a moment ago. "What do you mean?" "The first note of our symphony is about to be played," he said, his voice turning to steel. "The Falcones are hosting their annual charity ball tomorrow night. It is the biggest social event of the year, a grand performance of their legitimacy. The mayor will be there, the chief of police, everyone who matters." He turned his stormy gray eyes on me. "And so will we." "What?" I gasped. "That's insane. They're looking for me. Leo Falcone will be there." "Of course he will," Nikolai said with a chilling smile. "That is the point. You will not be Serafina Ricci, the terrified witness. You will be my guest. On my arm, untouchable. They'll kill me on sight." "No," he said, his confidence absolute. "They will do nothing to attack you in a room full of the city's elite. While you are on the arm of the Paken of the Volkov Bratva, it would be an open declaration of war, a war they are not yet ready for. It would be a catastrophic loss of face." He took a step closer. "This is not about violence. It is about a message. By showing you to them, by showing them that I have you, I'm telling them that I hold the sword that hangs over their heads. I'm telling them that their secrets are no longer safe." It was a terrifying, audacious gambit, a high-stakes performance on the grandest stage imaginable. And what is my part in this performance, I whispered, my heart hammering. Your part, he said, his gaze intense, is to simply be there, to be beautiful, to be strong, and to look Leo Falcone in the eye. He reached out, his thumb gently tracing my lower lip, and let him see that you are not afraid. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever asked of me, but as I looked into his cold, determined eyes, I knew I had no choice. I had played the first ugly notes of my own truth. Now, I had to play the first, dangerous note of his. Part 6, A Dance with the Devil. The Falcone Charity Ball was held in a grand, historic hotel, a place of crystal chandeliers and hushed, old-world elegance. It was a glittering facade, a beautiful lie designed to mask the rot and decay at the heart of the family that hosted it. I felt like an imposter, a ghost in a borrowed skin. I was wearing a blood-red, backless gown that Nikolai's anonymous shoppers had provided. It was a warrior's dress, a statement, diamonds, cold and brilliant, glittered at my throat and ears. My hair was swept up, my face a mask of carefully applied makeup. I was Serafina Ricci, the pianist, a celebrated artist. But tonight, I was also Nikolai Volkov's weapon. He was a devastating presence beside me, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He was not just handsome, he was breathtakingly powerful. He moved through the glittering crowd with a quiet, predatory grace, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. The other guests, the city's elite, parted for him like the sea before a dark god. They smiled, they nodded, but their eyes were full of fear. Heads up, Nikolai murmured, his voice a low rumble against my ear. The snakes have entered the garden. 10 o'clock. I turned my head slightly, and there he was, Leo Falcone. He was standing with a group of men, a champagne flute in his hand, laughing at some joke. He looked handsome, charming, a prince in his father's court. He looked nothing like the cold-blooded killer from the alley. And then he saw me. The laughter died on his lips. The color drained from his face. His champagne flute tilted, spilling the golden liquid onto the plush carpet. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief, fury, and a dawning, naked fear. Nikolai's hand tightened on my back, a silent, steadying pressure. I am here. You are safe. I did not look away. I held Leo Falcone's gaze from across the crowded room. I let him see me. I let him see that I was not a terrified, broken witness. I let him see that I was alive, that I was strong, and that I was on the arm of his family's greatest enemy. The message was sent, a silent, devastating declaration of war. The rest of the evening was a blur of tension and adrenaline. We danced. Nikolai was a surprisingly graceful dancer. His movements fluid and controlled. He held me close, our bodies moving as one, his arm a band of steel around me. It was not a dance of passion. It was a dance of power, a calculated display for the entire underworld to see. The Volkov Pakan and his prize, his witness. You are doing well, he murmured, his lips brushing against my temple. I feel like I'm going to be sick, I whispered back, my smile never faltering. That is the feeling of power, he said. Get used to it. Later. As we were standing by the grand windows overlooking the city, Marco Falcone, the Don himself, approached us. He was an older man, with a face like a Roman emperor and eyes as cold and dead as a winter sky. "Volkov," he said, his voice a gravelly rasp. "A bold move, bringing your guest here tonight." "She is not my guest, Falcone," Nikolai replied, his voice smooth as silk, his arm tightening around me possessively. "She is my future, a future you should be very, very concerned about." The old Don's eyes flickered to me, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred in their depths. "You are playing a dangerous game, boy." "I am not playing," Nikolai said, his voice turning to ice. "I am finishing a game that you started 10 years ago." The unspoken threat hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Don Falcone held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. The performance was over. We had lit the fuse in the car on the way back to the penthouse. The adrenaline finally faded, leaving me trembling and exhausted. "It is done," Nikolai said, his voice quiet. "Tonight, we have sown chaos and fear in their ranks. They will be paranoid, they will make mistakes, and we will be there to watch them fall." He reached across the seat and took my hand. His was warm, his grip firm. "You were magnificent tonight, Serafina," he said, and for the first time, I heard a note of genuine admiration, of something that sounded almost like pride in his voice. "You were a queen." I looked at our joined hands. I had just danced with the devil in the heart of his enemy's lair. I had faced down a killer and his father, and I had not flinched. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was mixed now with something else, a strange, dangerous, exhilarating feeling, the feeling of power, and I was terrified to realize that I was starting to get used to it. Part 7, a symphony of fear. The ball was a declaration of war, and the Falcone's response was swift and brutal. They did not attack Nikolai directly. That would have been too obvious, too clean. Instead, they began a campaign of terror, targeting the fringes of his empire. A warehouse torched, a shipment hijacked, a low-level enforcer found in a dumpster. Each act was a message, a dissonant chord in a rising symphony of fear. The atmosphere in the penthouse shifted. The quiet, oppressive silence was replaced by a constant, thrumming tension. The ghost of Nikolai, the distant, observing Pakan, was gone. In his place was the vulture, a creature of cold, focused rage. His study became a war room, filled with the constant murmur of phone calls and the grim faces of his captains. He was a master strategist, a conductor orchestrating a complex, deadly defense. I would watch him, sometimes for hours, as he moved pieces on a map of the city, his mind always 3 steps ahead of his enemies. He was magnificent. He was terrifying, and he began to include me. It started small. He would ask my opinion on the psychological impact of a certain move. "If you were them," he'd ask, his stormy gray eyes fixed on me, "what would this tell you? What would be your next move?" He was not asking for my knowledge of the criminal underworld. He was asking for my insight as an artist, as someone who understood emotion, nuance, and performance. I, who had once composed symphonies of sound, now found myself helping to compose a symphony of fear. My role began to evolve. I was no longer just the witness, the sequestered prize. I was becoming his confidant, his secret weapon. I had a keen memory honed by years of memorizing complex musical scores. I can remember details from reports, snippets of conversation, faces from surveillance photos that his men had missed. I saw the patterns, the connections. One evening, I was studying the reports of the Falcone attacks. There was no clear pattern. They were chaotic, random. But that, I realized, was the pattern. They're not trying to hurt your business, I said, walking into his study. He looked up from his map, his eyes weary. They're trying to hurt your reputation. They're trying to make you look weak, chaotic, unable to protect your own. They want your own men to lose faith in you. A new, dangerous light dawned in his eyes. He saw it. They are not attacking my body, he murmured. They are attacking my crown. And the only way to stop them, I continued, the pieces falling into place in my mind, is to show a sign of absolute, undeniable strength, not just to them, but to your own people. You need to cut the head off the snake. Leo Falcone, he breathed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He's the one leading this, I said, my voice firm. He's the rabid dog, and I am the only one who can put a leash on him. My plan was simple, it was terrifying, and it put me, once again, in the crosshairs. I would go to the police, not as a secret informant, but publicly. I would give a statement, as Serafina Ricci, the celebrated pianist, that I had been a witness to the senator's murder. I would describe the shooter. I would describe the mole above his eye, the silver ring. I would not name him. I would not mention the Falcones. I would simply paint a picture so clear, so undeniable, that the entire city would be looking for a man who matched that description. The police will put you in protective custody. Nikolai protested, his immediate reaction a fierce, primal surge of possessiveness. I will not have you out of my sight. And that is exactly what Leo will count on, I countered. He will assume you have me locked away. He will not be expecting me to walk into a police station, and when I do, I will not be a frightened witness asking for protection. I will be a concerned citizen, a public figure, demanding justice. I will have the media, the public, the city's elite, all on my side. They cannot make me disappear if the entire city is watching me. It was a queen's gambit. I was sacrificing my own safety, my anonymity, to put his greatest enemy in an impossible position. The police would have to investigate. The pressure on Leo Falcone would be immense. He would be a prince with a target on his back, and in his paranoia, he would make a mistake. Nikolai stared at me. A silent, furious battle raging in his eyes. He was at war with himself, the cold strategist who saw the brilliance of the plan, and the man who could not bear the thought of putting me in danger. You are asking me to let my most valuable possession walk out the door, he said, his voice a low growl. I am not your possession, Nikolai, I said softly, taking a step closer. I reached out and gently touched his cheek. I am your partner. Let me fight with you. He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch. I could feel the tremor that went through him. You will be a target, he whispered, his voice full of a pain that tore at my heart. I have been a target since the moment I walked down that alley, I replied. The only difference is now. I am no longer running. I am fighting back. He opened his eyes, and the conflict was gone, replaced by a grim, reluctant resolve. He had made his decision. So had I. Part 8, The Queen's Gambit, walking into the grand marble-floored lobby of the city's central police precinct, was the most terrifying performance of my life. I was not Serafina Ricci, the witness. I was Serafina Ricci, the untouchable darling of the city's art scene, a woman of grace and influence, here to report a terrible crime she had stumbled upon. Nikolai had prepped me, but he was not there. This had to be my solo. My presence was flanked not by Bratva enforcers, but by my high-powered lawyer, a man Nikolai had on retainer, who was known for his media savvy and his surgically precise dismantling of police procedure. The effect was exactly as we had planned. The desk sergeant, who had been ready to treat me like any other hysterical witness, was thrown completely off balance. Within minutes, the precinct captain was there, his face a mask of concern. The media, tipped off by an anonymous source, my lawyer, had already begun to gather outside. I gave my statement in a quiet, soundproof room. I was calm, collected, articulate. I described the alley, the rain, the two men. I described the shooter in meticulous, damning detail: his height, his build, his leather jacket, the silver ring, the small, distinctive mole above his right eyebrow. I described the sound of the silenced pistol. I described the senator falling. I did not mention the name Falcone. I did not have to. The entire underworld and a good portion of the police force would know exactly who I was describing when I was done. The captain looked at me, his eyes full of a new, wary respect. "Ms. Ricci," he said, "this is a very serious allegation. You understand that you will be in grave danger. I understand that a man was murdered, and his killer is walking free," I replied, my voice cool. "I am a citizen of the city. I have a duty to speak the truth. We will have to place you in protective custody," he insisted. "That will not be necessary," my lawyer interjected smoothly. "Ms. Ricci has her own private security. They are more than adequate. We will, of course, cooperate fully with your investigation, but she will not be treated like a criminal or a prisoner. She is a victim and a witness." It was a masterstroke. We had used their own rules, their own respect for wealth and status, against them. I had delivered the bombshell, and then I had simply walked away, leaving them to deal with the fallout. As we left the precinct, flanked by my security, two of Nikolai's most trusted men in discreet, tailored suits, we were mobbed by reporters. I said nothing. I simply held my head high and walked to the waiting car, a picture of quiet, dignified grief. The city exploded. My face was on every news channel, my story on the front page of every paper. Serafina Ricci star, pianist witnesses, senator's murder. The police, under immense public pressure, had no choice but to launch a full-scale, high-profile investigation, and the description of the killer was everywhere, back in the penthouse. Nikolai was waiting. He was watching the news, a slow, dangerous smile on his face. He turned as I entered, his eyes blazing with a fierce, triumphant pride. He came to me and pulled me into his arms, crushing me against him. "You were magnificent," he murmured into my hair. "A queen. You have just checkmated them without moving a single piece on the board." "What happens now?" I whispered, my head resting on his chest, the solid, steady beat of his heart, a comforting rhythm. "Now," he said, his voice a low, predatory purr. We watched the serpent begin to eat its own tail. Leo Falcone is now a liability to his father. He is a loose cannon with the entire city watching him. He will become paranoid. He will make a mistake, and I will be there to catch him when he falls. He was right. The first reports started to come in within days. Leo, who had always been arrogant and reckless, was now becoming erratic. He was seen arguing with his father in public. He started drinking heavily. He was a prince who was rapidly losing the confidence of his court. My gambit had worked, but it had come at a price. I was no longer a ghost. I was the most famous witness in the city. My face was everywhere. I was a target. The gilded cage of the penthouse was now, more than ever, my only sanctuary, and the monster who had put me there was now my only protector. The line between captor and savior had been completely erased. Part 9, The Scent of Betrayal. Leo Falcone was a wounded animal, and a wounded animal is at its most dangerous. My public testimony had painted a target on his back, and he was lashing out. The war between the Falcones and the Volkoffs escalated, moving from the shadows into the open. It was no longer a series of surgical strikes, but a full-blown street war. The body count was rising on both sides. The penthouse, once a silent, sterile fortress, now felt like a besieged castle. The tension was a constant, living thing. Nikolai was a man possessed, consumed by the war. He barely ate, barely slept. He lived in his study, a general commanding his troops from a glass tower, and I was there, by his side. I was no longer an instrument. I was his partner, his war council of one, my insights, my ability to see the patterns in the chaos, had become invaluable to him. He trusted my instincts, my judgment. In a way, he trusted no one else's. Our intimacy grew in the crucible of the war. It was not an intimacy of candlelit dinners and soft words. It was the intimacy of two soldiers in a foxhole. It was in the shared, silent understanding across a crowded war room. It was in the way he would come to me in the dead of night, his eyes full of the ghosts of the men he had lost that day. And he would let me hold him, his proud, stubborn head resting on my shoulder. It was in the desperate, hungry way we would come together, our passion, a fierce, defiant act of life in the midst of so much death. I had fallen in love with him. It was not a gentle, easy love. It was a violent, all-consuming thing, a dangerous melody that had taken over my soul. I loved the monster and the man, the ruthless Pakan and the broken boy who still mourned his family. But as the war raged on, I began to notice things, small inconsistencies, a piece of intelligence that was just a little too perfect, a trap that the Falcones avoided at the last second, as if they had been warned. There was a leak, a traitor in our midst. I started my own quiet investigation, a secret even from Nikolai. I didn't want to add to his burdens, to fuel the paranoia that was a constant part of his world. I used my access to his systems, not to wage war, but to hunt for a different kind of enemy. The suspicion fell on Ivan, his silent, watchful head of security. He had always been loyal. But he had also been resentful of my position, of the influence I had over his boss. I followed the digital trails. I cross-referenced security logs, phone records, financial transfers, and I found it. a series of encrypted payments from an offshore account, an account that, with a little more digging, I traced back to a shell corporation owned by the Falcone family. The payments were being made to a third party, and that third party was a private nurse who was caring for Ivan's dying mother. He wasn't doing it for greed. He was doing it for his family. The Falcones had found his weakness, his one vulnerability, and they were exploiting it. He was a good soldier, a loyal man, forced into an impossible act of betrayal. The knowledge was a cold, heavy stone in my gut. I had to tell Nikolai. I knew what his law was. Betrayal was paid for in blood. There were no exceptions. I went to his study, my heart aching. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city, the weight of the war on his shoulders. "Nikolai," I said, my voice quiet. "I know who the traitor is." He turned, his face a mask of stone. I told him everything. I showed him the proof on my tablet. I watched as his face went from disbelief to a cold, terrible fury, and then, finally, to a profound, aching sadness. Ivan was more than his head of security. He was the son of his father's most loyal friend. They had grown up together. He was the closest thing Nikolai had to a brother. He was my last link to my father, Nikolai whispered, his voice hoarse. The last person who remembered our family before. He did it for his mother, I said softly. They used his love for her against him. Love, he spat. The word a curse. In our world, love is a weapon, the one you give your enemies to use against you. He looked at me, his eyes full of a terrible, agonizing conflict. I have to kill him, Serafina. The law is the law. If I show weakness now, if I let this stand, everything will crumble. He was right. His authority, his very life, depended on it. But I looked at this man I loved, this man who was being forced to kill the last piece of his own past, and my heart broke. There is another way, I said, a desperate, reckless idea forming in my mind. Let me talk to him. Let me try to turn him back. He is not a true traitor. He is a man in an impossible position. Maybe we can use him. Maybe the Falcone's greatest asset can become our own. It was a fool's hope, a sentimental, dangerous gamble, but I could not stand by and watch Nikolai destroy another piece of his own soul. He stared at me, his face a mask of torment. He was at war with himself, the cold, ruthless Pakan, versus the man who was learning to love. "Please, Nikolai," I whispered. "Trust me. Let me try." Part 10, The Traitor's Aria. The meeting with Ivan took place in the music room. It was my territory, a place of relative neutrality in the cold, hard world of the penthouse. Nikolai was not there, but I knew he was watching, listening from his study. The entire weight of Ivan's life and my own credibility rested on this conversation. Ivan entered, his massive frame seeming to shrink in the large room. He looked weary, his face etched with the guilt he had been carrying. He would not meet my eyes. "The Pakan sent for me," he said, in voice a low, rough rumble. "I did," I said, my voice calm. "Please, sit." He remained standing, a soldier at attention. "I do not sit with the Pakan's woman." The words were laced with his old resentment. "Then stand," I said, my voice softening. "Ivan, I know about your mother, and I know about the payments." The color drained from his face. He looked, For the first time, not like a formidable Bratva captain, but like a terrified boy. I don't know what you're talking about. Please do not lie. I said gently. I am not here to accuse you. I am here to understand. I took a step closer. They threatened her, didn't they? They promised you the best medical care, a miracle, if you just gave them small things, a schedule, a route, information that seemed insignificant. He finally looked at me, his eyes full of a terrible, desperate shame. He gave a single, jerky nod. You love your mother, I said, my voice a whisper. You would do anything for her. That is not a crime. Ivan, that is not a betrayal. That is honor. A single, hot tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. I have dishonored my father's name. He choked out. I have dishonored the Pakan, my brother. Nikolai is not just your Pakan, I said. He is your brother, and he is in a war for his life. A war started by the same men who are using your mother's life to poison you. I let the words sink in. They do not care about her. Ivan, she is just a tool to them, the moment they have what they truly want, the moment Nikolai is dead. They will discard you both. You know this. He did. The terrible truth was written all over his face. You have a choice, I continued, pressing the advantage. You can continue to be their pawn and let them destroy the only family you have left. Or you can help us. You can help us end this. You can choose your real brother. He will kill me, he whispered, his voice full of despair. The law is the law. The law is Nikolai's to command, I said, my voice firm, and I am asking him to show mercy. But you have to give him a reason. You have to prove where your loyalty truly lies. I took a final step. So I was standing directly in front of him. The Falcones are planning something, a final move to end this war. I know they are, and they will use you to make it happen. You are their inside man, their key. I looked him in the eye, my gaze unwavering. Tell us what it is. Ivan, help us set a trap. Help us destroy them, and I swear to you, I will not let Nikolai kill you. You have my word. It was the aria of my life, a performance where every note, every word, had to be perfect. I was offering a traitor a chance at redemption, a chance to come back from the cold. He stared at me for a long, agonizing moment, a silent, furious battle raging in his soul. And then he crumpled, not physically, but emotionally. He sank into a chair, his massive head in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. The war for his soul was over, and we had won. When he finally looked up, his eyes were clear, full of a new, grim resolve. They are planning to hit the St. Michael's Gala, he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. The annual fundraiser for the Police Benevolent Fund. The entire city's leadership will be there. Security will be a nightmare for any outside force. But I am on the inside of security detail. My blood ran cold. It was the perfect target. Public, high profile. They are not planning to kill Nikolai there, Ivan continued. They are planning something worse. Something that will destroy him completely. They are planning to kill you. Part 11. The Devil's Due. Ivan's confession was a bomb that detonated in the quiet of the penthouse, shattering the last vestiges of our reactive strategy. We were no longer defending. We were going on the offensive. And the St. Michael's Gala was to be our battlefield, to kill you on my watch, at a public event, Nikolai said, his voice a low, chilling whisper as he paced his study. It would not just be an assassination. It would be a message. It would brand me as weak, unable to protect what is mine. It would be a humiliation from which I could never recover. My own men would turn on me. It's a brilliant, evil plan. I agreed, my own fear a cold knot in my stomach. But it was a fear mixed with a new, hard-edged resolve. They had made this personal. They had targeted me, and they had underestimated me. Ivan is our key, Nikolai continued, his mind already working, the master strategist taking over. They will expect him to disable a camera, to open a side door, to create a window of opportunity for their shooter. He stopped pacing and looked at me, a dangerous, predatory light in his eyes. And he will. The plan we devised was a symphony of deception, a masterpiece of misdirection. It was a trap within a trap. Ivan would play his part as the traitor, feeding his Falcone contact the information they wanted. He would give them a route, a time, a location for their assassin, but the location would be of our choosing, and the target would not be me. The night of the gala arrived, a swirl of flashing camera bulbs and glittering jewels. The security was, as Ivan had predicted, a fortress, but we had a ghost on the inside. I wore a gown of midnight blue, the color of a moonless sky. Diamonds glittered at my throat, a cold, hard fire. I was the bait. I was the beautiful, fragile target, walking into the lion's den. But this time, I was not just a performer. I was a hunter. Nikolai was a dark, magnificent presence by my side, his hand a constant, reassuring weight on my back. To the outside world, we were a power couple, the dark king of the underworld and his mysterious, beautiful queen. But beneath the surface, every nerve was screaming, every sense on high alert. We moved through the glittering crowd, smiling, shaking hands, playing our parts. I saw Leo Falcone across the room, watching me. His eyes were full of a triumphant, reptilian hatred. He thought my death was only minutes away. He had no idea he was the one walking into the executioner's chamber. Ivan had told them I would be vulnerable in the North Garden, a secluded, dimly lit area where I would go for a breath of fresh air. He had promised to disable the camera overlooking the west entrance to the garden at precisely 10:15 p.m. At 10:10, Nikolai leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. "It's time," he murmured. "Are you ready?" "I was born ready," I whispered back, a cold, hard smile on my lips. I excused myself and walked toward the garden doors, feeling the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on my back. But the only ones that mattered were Leo Falcone's. I knew he was watching. I knew he was savoring his victory. I did not go into the North Garden. Instead, I slipped into a small, private antechamber that we had secured earlier. Nikolai was there, along with 2 of his most trusted men. He handed me an earpiece. "Ivan is in position," he said, his voice a low rumble in my ear. "The Falcone shooter is moving toward the west entrance. He is in place." Through the earpiece, I could hear Ivan's calm, steady voice, relaying information from his position on the security detail. "Target is in the garden. He's alone." But the target was not me. At 10:14, 1 minute before the camera was supposed to go down, Nikolai had made a quiet, anonymous call to Marco Falcone, the old Don. He had told him that his son, Leo, was about to make a foolish, unsanctioned move, that he was in the North Garden, alone, about to kill the Volkov Pakan's woman and start a war that would destroy them all. We had gambled on the old Don's pride, on his fury at his son's recklessness. Don Falcone is on the move. Ivan's voice crackled in my ear. He is heading for the garden. He is furious. We had not sent an assassin to kill Leo Falcone. We had sent his own father. We listened, our hearts pounding, to the drama unfolding in the garden. We heard Marco Falcone's enraged voice, confronting his son. We heard Leo's panicked denials. We heard the sound of a single, sharp slap. And then, we heard the old Don's voice, cold and final. You are a disgrace to this family. You are no longer my son. It was over. Leo Falcone had not been killed. He had been disowned, exiled, stripped of his name, his power, his future in the world of the Yakuza. It was a fate worse than death. We had not just won the battle. We had won the war, and we had done it without firing a single shot. We had used their own pride, their own rage, their own family to destroy them from within. It was a victory of pure, surgical precision. A slow smile spread across Nikolai's face. He looked at me, his eyes full of a love and a pride so profound it took my breath away. Checkmate, Moya Koroleva, he murmured, my queen. The devil had been paid his due, and his witness had just conducted the final, triumphant note of their symphony. Part 12. Coda. The aftermath of the St. Michael's Gala was a quiet, seismic shift in the city's underworld, the Falcone family, crippled by the public disgrace of their heir, began to crumble. Don Marco Falcone, a king who had effectively executed his own son's future, seemed to lose his will to fight. He retreated, his empire shrinking, his power fading. The war was over, ending not with a bang, but with a whisper. The Volkov Bratva, in contrast, was stronger than ever. Nikolai's reputation was solidified. He was no longer just the vulture, the patient avenger. He was a master strategist, a ghost who could win a war without leaving a trace. And I, Serafina Ricci, was a mystery, a ghost in my own right. The police investigation into the senator's murder quietly stalled. The trail going cold. The media moved on to other, fresher scandals. I was the pianist who had seen something, and then had vanished back into the rarefied air of the city's elite, under the formidable protection of my new, powerful benefactor. Our life found a new rhythm, a new kind of peace. The tension of the war was gone, replaced by a deep, quiet intimacy. The penthouse was no longer a cage. It was our home, our sanctuary. Ivan, true to my word, was not killed. He was given a choice, exile, with a generous pension to care for his mother for the rest of her days, or to stay, his rank stripped, and to re-earn his place, his honor, from the very bottom. He chose to stay. He chose his brother. His first duty was as the head of my personal security detail, a constant, silent reminder of loyalty, betrayal, and redemption. One evening, months after the gala, I was sitting at the grand piano. My music had returned, no longer born of pain and chaos, but of a deep, complex, and profound love. The melodies were no longer broken. They were whole. Nikolai came to me, as he often did, and stood behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders as I played. I finished the piece, a soft, lyrical melody I had composed myself, and rested my hands in my lap. "It's beautiful," he murmured, his lips brushing against my hair. "It's a love song," I whispered. "For a monster and a man." He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I have something for you." He placed a small velvet box on the piano. I opened it. Inside was not a diamond ring or a necklace. It was a single, ornate, antique key. "What is this?" I asked, looking up at him. "It is the key to a house," he said, his voice soft. "A house on the coast, far from here. It is surrounded by gardens. It is quiet. It is safe. It is a place where a woman can compose her music and a man can rest." He was offering me a different kind of life, a life away from the city, away from the Brava, away from the ghosts of our past. "And what of your empire?" I asked. "An empire is a cage, Serafina," he said, his eyes full of a wisdom that had been hard won. "I have spent my life building it, defending it, but I do not want to die in it." He took my hand, his grip firm. "I am not asking you to leave. I am asking you to come with me." It was the ultimate choice, to stay as the queen of this dark kingdom, or to walk away with the king himself into a new, unknown world. I looked from the key to his hopeful, searching eyes, to the city glittering like a carpet of fallen stars beyond the window. Our symphony of vengeance was over. It was time to compose a new one, a symphony of peace. "Only," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, "if the house has a piano." He threw his head back and laughed, a deep, genuine sound of pure joy that was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. The devil had been paid his due. The witness had found her voice, and together we were finally going home. Part 13, the unspoken note. The house on the coast was a dream. It was an old, stone villa perched on a cliff overlooking a wild, churning sea, surrounded by sprawling, overgrown gardens. It was a world away from the cold, modern perfection of the penthouse. It was a place with history, with soul. It was a place that needed healing, just like us. We spent the first few months in a state of blissful, suspended reality. We were not Nikolai Volkov, the Pakhan, and Serafina Ricci, the witness. We were simply Nikolai and Serafini. We worked in the gardens together, coaxing life back into the tangled roses and lavender. We walked on the deserted beaches, our hands intertwined. We cooked, we read, we talked for hours, filling the empty house with the sound of our own quiet happiness. Nikolai began to change. The harsh, guarded lines on his face softened. The haunted look in his eyes was replaced by a deep, steady calm. The monster was not just asleep. It felt like he was finally gone, leaving only the man, a man who was learning, for the first time in his life, how to be at peace. And I was reborn. The music poured out of me, no longer just a reflection of my own story, but of ours. It was full of the storm and the calm, the darkness and the light. The grand piano Nikolai had installed in a sun-drenched room overlooking the sea was my constant companion. But even in paradise, the ghosts of the past cast long shadows. Nikolai still ran his empire, but he did it from a distance, through a secure, encrypted network from a small office he had built, hidden behind a false wall in the library. He was delegating more, trusting the men he had put in place, like Ivan, who was now his loyal and fiercely protective second-in-command. He was trying to untangle himself from the daily brutality of his world, but the crown, once worn, is not so easily set aside. One evening, a call came through that shattered our peace. It was Ivan. There was a problem. A new, young, and brutally ambitious faction was rising in the city, the Chernoff brothers. They were not playing by the old rules. They were attacking everyone, the Falcones, the Irish, and the fringes of our own organization. They were chaos incarnate. I watched Nikolai as he listened, his face hardening, the old, cold mask of the dawn slipping back into place. "I will handle it," he said, his voice flat, and ended the call. He turned to me, and the man who had been laughing with me in the garden an hour earlier was gone. "I have to go back," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Just for a few days, to restore order." "No," I said, my blood running cold. You can't go back to that life. You promised. It is my duty, Serafina," he said, his voice hard. "It is my responsibility. If I do not stop them, the entire city will burn." "Let it burn," I cried, my voice rising with a desperate fear. "It is not in your city anymore. This is our life now." "This life," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl, "is only possible because of the power and the order that I provide. If my empire falls, we will be hunted for the rest of our lives. There is no peace without strength. You know this?" He was right. Our beautiful, fragile peace was a lie, a bubble maintained only by the fear and respect his name still commanded. He was a king in exile, but his kingdom was under attack, and the king had to return. The argument that followed was the worst of our lives. It was a clash of our two worlds, the peaceful dream I was clinging to, and the brutal reality he could never truly escape. In the end, he did what he had to do. He left. He kissed me, a hard, desperate kiss that tasted of regret and duty, and he walked out the door, back to the world of shadows I had thought we had escaped. I stood alone in our beautiful house, the silence a screaming, mocking thing. The piano was silent. The music was gone again, replaced by the ugly, dissonant chord of fear. I had been a fool to believe we could escape. The devil had been paid his due, but the world always comes to collect its debts, and I was terrified that this time the price would be him. Part 14, The Scars of a Crown. The days Nikolai was gone were an agony of silence. I did not play. I did not walk on the beach. I haunted the rooms of our home, a ghost in my own paradise, waiting for a call that would tell me he was safe, or that he was gone forever. He called only once, his voice tired, distant. "It is complicated," was all he would say. "I will be home soon. I love you." He came back a week later. In the dead of night, I heard the car on the gravel driveway and ran to the door. He stood there, silhouetted in the moonlight, looking like a soldier returning from a brutal war. He was exhausted. His face was bruised, and there was a fresh, angry-looking cut over his eyebrow, but he was alive. I threw myself into his arms, clinging to him, my tears soaking his shirt. He held me tight, his face buried in my hair, his body trembling with a weariness that was bone deep. "It's over," he whispered. "It's done." Later, after I had cleaned his cuts, He told me what had happened. The Chernoff brothers were more dangerous, more insane than he had anticipated. They had not been interested in negotiation. They had wanted only chaos. There had been a battle, a bloody, brutal confrontation in a warehouse that had left many men dead on both sides. He had ended it himself, facing down the last brother in a final, bloody duel. He had restored order, but the price had been high. I saw him, Serafina, he said, his voice a hoarse whisper as we lay in the dark, his arm a heavy, comforting weight around me. The man I was, the vulture, I had to become him again to win, and I hated it. He had seen the face of his own monster, and it had horrified him. The peace he had found with me had made the brutality of his old life unbearable. You did what you had to do to come home, I said softly, my hand stroking his hair. To us. But what if there is always another war? He asked, his voice full of a terrible, aching vulnerability. What if I can never truly leave it behind? What if I am destined to always be that man? No, I said, my voice fierce. I rose up on one elbow, forcing him to look at me in the faint moonlight. That man is a part of you. He is the warrior who protects us. But he is not all of you. He is not the man who gardens, who listens to my music, who will teach our son how to skip stones across the water. His eyes searched mine, looking for a truth he could not find in himself. You wear a crown, Nikolai, I whispered, my fingers gently tracing the new scar over his eye. And a crown leaves scars, but it does not have to define the man who wears it. I leaned down and kissed him, a kiss of acceptance, of healing, a kiss that acknowledged all the parts of him, the light and the dark, the monster, and the man. I loved them all, in the quiet of our bedroom, with the sound of the ocean, a gentle, rhythmic sigh outside. He finally let go. He let go of the guilt, of the rage, of the ghost of the vulture. He was just Nikolai, my Nikolai, a scarred, beautiful, and finally, whole man. The war outside was over, and the war within was finally, truly, at peace. Part 15. The unfinished symphony life settled into a new, more honest rhythm. We did not live in a dream of perfect peace anymore. We lived in a reality that we had chosen, a reality we had fought for. The darkness was a part of our world, a shadow that would always be there. But it no longer had the power to consume us. Nikolai changed the structure of his empire. He promoted Ivan, who had proven his unwavering loyalty, to be his proxy in the city. He ran the Bratva from a distance, becoming the ghost he had once been. The invisible hand that guided the empire with wisdom and a new, tempered strength. He was a king, but a king who ruled from afar. His heart and his home on a quiet coast, a world away. Our son was born. We named him Mikhail, after Nikolai's father. He had my dark hair and his father's stormy gray eyes. He was a perfect, beautiful fusion of our two worlds. Holding him, watching Nikolai hold him, a look of fierce, tender love on his face. I knew we had found our true purpose. We were not just building a life for ourselves. We were building a legacy not of vengeance and blood, but of love and survival. One afternoon, when Misha was a few months old, I was at the piano, playing. It was a new piece, a concerto I had been working on. It was a story of us. It was full of dark, tumultuous chords, of chaotic, violent passages, but it was also full of moments of breathtaking, fragile beauty, of soaring, hopeful melodies. It was complex. It was dissonant. It was beautiful. It was true. Nikolai came into the room, holding our son in his arms. He stood and listened until I had finished. The final, triumphant chord hung in the air, full of a promise that was hard-won and real. "It's not finished," I said, looking up at him. "No," he agreed, his eyes shining. "It is not." He came and sat on the bench beside me. Our son nestled between us. He reached out, his hand, scarred and strong, covering mine on the keys. Misha reached out a tiny, perfect hand and pressed it against the ivory, producing a single, clear, high note. The sound, bright and full of promise, echoed in the sunlit room. Our life would never be a simple melody. It would always be a grand, complex, and sometimes dangerous symphony. There would always be new movements, new challenges, new dissonant chords. But as long as we were here, together, the three of us, it would always, always be beautiful. The witness had found her music, the devil had found his peace, and their symphony was just beginning. Part 16, the echo of a name. Years passed, quiet and serene as the tide. Our son, Misha, grew from a baby into a bright, curious boy. He had my love for music and his father's quiet, observant nature. He knew nothing of the bratva, of the vulture, of the falcones. He knew only the sun, the sea, and the fierce, unwavering love of his parents. Our quiet life in Portugal was our reality. The violence of our past was a story, a bad dream, but a name, once powerful, never truly loses its echo. One day, a letter arrived. It was not delivered by the postman. It was left on our doorstep by a ghost, a discreet vellum envelope with no return address. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper bearing the crest of the Volkov family. It was a formal summons. The 5 major families of the East Coast Syndicate were convening a council as the undisputed and most powerful leader. Nikolai's presence was not requested. It was required. The peace was shattered. "What is it?" I asked, seeing the old, hard mask slip back over Nikolai's face as he read. "It is a power vacuum," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble I had not heard in years. "The old guard is dying off. The falcones are a shadow of what they were. New players are rising, young and hungry, with no respect for the old ways. They are threatening to tear the entire syndicate apart in a war that will burn everyone." He looked at me, his eyes full of a grim resignation. "They need a king to restore order. They are calling for me." "You can't go," I said, my voice sharp with a sudden, cold fear. "You are Nikolai Silva. You are a gardener, a father. You are not that man anymore." "Am I not?" he asked, his voice quiet. And in that question, I heard the terrible truth. He could change his name, his home, his life, but he could not change who he was. He was born to rule. It was in his blood. "They will not let you leave once you are there," I argued, my heart pounding. "They will pull you back in." "I have to go, Serafina," he said, his voice full of a heartbreaking finality. "If I do not, the chaos will spread. It will find us here. Eventually, there is no running from this. The only way to protect our peace is to secure my throne." He took my hands in his grip firm. "This is the last time. I will go, I will forge a new alliance. I will put a structure in place that will last for a generation, and then I will come home. For good. I swear it. It was an oath, but I'd seen the price of his oaths before. He left the next day. He kissed me. A long, deep kiss that tasted of love and a terrible foreboding. He knelt and kissed our son, who was blissfully unaware, his small hand clutching his father's finger, and then he was gone. A dark suit in a black car, driving away from our sunlit paradise, back to the world of shadows he had sworn to leave behind. I stood on the cliff, watching until the car was a tiny speck on the horizon, the wind whipping my hair, the taste of salt and fear on my lips. The symphony was not over. A new, dark, and dangerous movement had just begun. Part 17. The Queen in the Shadows. The silence of the house was a physical weight. Without Nikolai, the sun seemed less bright. The music from the piano sounded hollow. I was alone with my son and my fear. Days turned into a week. He called every night, his voice tired, strained. The council was a nest of vipers. The young, ambitious leaders were challenging his authority at every turn. He was winning. But it was a slow, brutal war of wills, fought in boardrooms and back alleys one night. The call I was dreading came. It was not from Nikolai. It was from Ivan. His voice was grim. "Serafina," he said, the use of my first name a sign of the severity of the situation. "There's been an incident, an ambush. Nikolai is alive, but he is hurt." The world tilted. "How bad?" I whispered, my hand clutching the table for support. "He's stable, but he took a bullet to the shoulder. He is weak, and his enemies know it. They are circling. The Chernoff brothers, the ones who started this, they see their chance." "Where is he?" I demanded. "At the penthouse. It is the only secure location." I looked at my son, sleeping peacefully in his crib, my beautiful, innocent boy. My first instinct was to lock the doors, to hide, to protect him. But my second, deeper instinct, the one that had been forged in fire and fear by Nikolai's side, was different. A queen does not hide when her king is wounded. She fights. "I'm coming," I said, my voice a cold, hard thing I did not recognize. "It is too dangerous." Ivan protested. "The most dangerous place for me to be right now is far from his side." I retorted. "They know he is weak. They will see me, his wife, his weakness, as an easy target to finish him off." I took a deep, steadying breath. "Get the jet ready, Ivan, and prepare the penthouse. The queen is coming to the castle." The journey back to the city was a blur. I left Misha in the care of a trusted security team at a secondary, unknown safe house. A painful but necessary precaution. When I walked back into the penthouse, the place I had once called a cage, it felt like coming home. Nikolai was in the master bedroom, his arm in a sling, his face pale and drawn, but his eyes, when he saw me, lit up with a fire that was a mixture of love, fury, and a profound, aching relief. "You should not have come," he rasped, his voice weak. "You should not have gotten shot," I replied, my voice soft as I came to his bedside and gently touched his face. "We are in this together, my love, for better or for worse." I took my place, not at his bedside, but in his chair, in his study, the war room, his captains, his soldiers. looked at me with shock, but no one dared to question me. I was the Pakin's wife, and with the king wounded, the queen would now command. I was not Nikolai. I could not rule by fear or by the legend of my name. I had to rule with my own weapons, my intelligence, my insight, and my intimate knowledge of the man whose empire I was now protecting. I summoned Ivan. Tell me everything about the Chernoff brothers, I commanded, their strengths, their weaknesses, their passions, their fears. I want to know them better than their own mothers do. For the next 2 days, I did not sleep. I lived on coffee and a cold, burning rage. I dissected the Chernovs' empire, their personalities, and I found their weakness. They were not strategists. They were street brawlers, driven by greed and a love for beautiful, expensive things. And their greatest prize was a collection of rare, stolen art they had recently acquired, a collection that included a lost masterpiece by Degas. The trap was set. Part 18, An Aria of Steel. The Chernov brothers believed they were invincible. They had wounded the great Nikolai Volkov. They were the new kings of the city. Their arrogance was a gaping, fatal flaw, and I intended to exploit it. I used one of Nikolai's most discreet contacts in the art world, an old, impeccably dressed man who owed Nikolai his life. He approached the Chernovs, posing as a representative for a shadowy, anonymous collector of immense wealth. This collector, he explained, was obsessed with Degas and was willing to pay an astronomical, almost ludicrous, price for their stolen masterpiece. The greed of the Chernovs was a predictable, pathetic thing. They agreed to a private viewing, a chance to show off their prize and close the deal of a lifetime. The viewing was to take place in their own secure gallery, a converted warehouse in the meatpacking district. They thought they were in control. They will bring their best men. Nikolai warned me from his bed, his voice still weak, but his eyes sharp, following my every move on the tactical map I had laid out. It will be a fortress with a very predictable weakness, I replied, a cold smile on my lips. Their pride. The night of the viewing, our art collector's representative arrived. He was not alone. He was accompanied by a team of art handlers, large, quiet men in overalls, the Chernovs, blinded by the promise of millions. Let them in. The art handlers were, of course, Nikolai's most elite soldiers, led by Ivan. The battle was not a battle. It was an execution. It was swift, silent, and absolute. The Chernov brothers and their inner circle were eliminated before they even realized they were in a trap. I listened to the entire operation from the penthouse, through a secure comm line, my heart pounding a frantic, brutal rhythm. I listened to Ivan's calm, steady voice giving orders. I listened to the soft, choked coughs of silenced weapons. I listened to the end of a war I had orchestrated when Ivan's voice came through, clean and final. It is done. Koroleva, the threat is neutralized. A wave of something dark and triumphant washed over me. It was the feeling of power, the feeling I had first tasted at the Falcone Gala. But this was different. This was not a performance. This was a victory I had composed myself. I went to Nikolai's room. He was awake, waiting. He had been listening too. He looked at me, and his eyes were full of a terrible, beautiful pride. "My queen," he whispered, his voice full of awe. I went to him and took his hand. "Your kingdom is safe, my love." "No," he said, his good hand coming up to cup my face. "Our kingdom?" In that moment, we were no longer a king and his consort. We were equals, two sovereigns of a dark, dangerous world, bound by a love that had been forged in fire and tempered into steel. I had not just been his witness. I had become his sword. Part 19. The crown with the Chernov threat eliminated. A new kind of order settled over the East Coast Syndicate. It was the order of Nikolai Volkov. His legend, already formidable, now grew to mythic proportions. He was the king who could not be killed, the ghost who could wage a war from his sickbed, and at his side was a new, terrifying power, the Koroleva, the queen, a woman with the face of an angel and the mind of a master strategist. We had become a dynasty. When Nikolai was healed, we returned to Portugal, but it was different now. We were not in exile. We were rulers, commanding our empire from our chosen sanctuary. We had found the balance. We had our peace, but we also had our power. We had our family, and we had our crown. The years that followed were the golden years of the Volkov reign. We ruled with a new kind of authority, Nikolai's strength, tempered by my compassion, his ruthlessness, guided by my strategy. We built an empire that was more stable, more profitable, and less bloody than any that had come before. We raised our son, Misha, in our sunlit paradise, far from the shadows of our other life. We taught him music and history and how to be a good, kind man. We gave him the childhood neither of us had ever had, but we did not lie to him. As he grew older, we began to tell him the story of a brave pianist and a haunted Russian pakhan, the story of a debt, a war, and a great, impossible love. He needed to know where he came from. He needed to understand the weight of the name he would one day carry. One evening, when Misha was a young man, on the verge of leaving for university, the three of us were walking on the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery colors. "When I am gone," Nikolai said, his voice quiet, looking at our son, "the empire will be yours, but it does not have to be your life. Your mother and I, we have fought the wars. We have paid the price. We have built a peace for you." He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Your life is your own, Misha. You can be a musician, a scholar, a gardener, whatever you choose. The crown is your birthright. It is not your cage." Misha listened, his young face serious. He looked from his father's proud, scarred face to my own. "I understand," he said, his voice full of a quiet strength that was a perfect fusion of us both. "But a king must protect his kingdom. He had his father's sense of duty, and my stubborn heart. He would find his own way. He would be a new kind of leader, a better one." Part 20. The final note. Years later, I am an old woman. My hair is silver. My hands are gnarled with age, but they can still find their way across the piano keys. Nikolai sits in his favorite armchair by the window, his magnificent, fierce face softened by time, his stormy gray eyes still full of a deep and abiding love for me. We are in our home, our sanctuary. The world outside has changed. Misha is now the pakhan. He rules with a wisdom and a compassion that has brought a new era of peace to their world, a world we only hear about in quiet, respectful phone calls. He is a good king, a good man. The empire is a distant echo, the violence, a faded memory. Our life is this, the sound of the ocean, the warmth of the sun, the quiet, comfortable silence between two people who have shared one soul for a lifetime. I am playing the piano, the concerto, the story of us. It is a piece I have played 1,000 times, but it is never the same. It changes, as we have changed. The dark, chaotic passages are still there, a reminder of the storms we weathered, but they are softer now, tempered by the long, lyrical passages of peace, of love, of a life well lived. Nikolai reaches out his hand, and I take it, my fingers lacing with his. His grip is still strong. It is beautiful, Moya Koroleva, he whispers, his voice a frail echo of the powerful rumble it once was. It is our song, I reply, my voice soft. I look at him, at the handsome, beloved face of the man who was once my captor, my enemy, my savior, my king, my husband, my life, the monster who had stolen my music, and the man who had given it back to me, more beautiful and more true than it had ever been before. The final note of our symphony hangs in the air, a single, perfect note of grace. It is not an end. It is a coda, a final, beautiful statement of a love that was forged in darkness, and that found its way, against all odds, into the light. The devil had found his witness, and together they had composed a masterpiece,